Gene, what's the difference between a revocable and an irrevocable trust? And which one is the best?
Often I get interviewed by the media, Consumer Reports, Kiplinger's, Forbes magazine. I do a little promo with Forbes magazine on Can You Afford It, similar to Susie Orman. And one of the things that we talk about is the best way to title things, how to keep out of probate, what's simplest, whether you're single or married, it's going to be important in both instances. Beautiful thing about Florida and many other states is that you can have beneficiaries on everything you own, including your home. With a beneficiary, you don't need a will. Your beneficiary document is going to override your will. And who wants a will anyway? They're state specific, they're cumbersome, they're out of date, they've never been updated, and they all have to go through probate. So you really don't want a will. It's best to just have beneficiaries on everything. Now, lots of people set up trusts here in Florida. One of the things we see a lot of, and any state that has a lot of elderly people, retirees, is that the attorneys can't get a job doing anything else when they get out of school, so they decide they're going to be an estate planning attorney. They buy a program for about $50, plug in your information, and they can make a trust for you, boom, like that. And you pay them $750 or possibly more for that. Now, I'm not saying all trusts or trust attorneys are bad, but you need to be careful. First of all, do you need a trust? You need a trust, and I'm speaking of a revocable trust, if you have $5 million or more. Now, that's going to be changing. We'll talk about that in a minute. But if you have $5 million or more, you're definitely going to want to have a revocable, which means changeable, living trust, so that you can have 2 death tax exemptions. That's going to be vital. If you don't have that larger estate, you could probably do any combination of these here, which are beneficiaries on assets. Your TODs stand for transfer on death. That's going to be used for real estate. It's going to be used for stock certificates. It's going to be used for, say, bonds. Your PODs are going to be used for your banking account, CDs, savings, credit union, savings bonds. ITF is also used at the bank. You might have an account, a checking account with ITF. It stands for in trust for. It doesn't mean you have a trust. It just means you have a beneficiary. Revocable living trust. We just talked about that one. Some people own that. They have their assets titled in it. You want to be careful. Maybe you paid that attorney $750 for that trust, but nothing ever got put into it. That's called a dry trust. When you die, everything's got to be probated anyway. So you want to make sure by looking at your tax statements, you've probably just gotten one in the mail on your home, how is it titled? Does it just have your name on it? Does it just have yours and your husband's name on it? If it does, it's not in your trust. It would say revocable living trust next to your name, or trustees next to your name. If that's not on there, it was never put in your trust. Lady just came yesterday, $2 million. She pulls out her fidelity statement, and it says individual. I say to her, Linda, I thought you had a trust. She says, I do. I said, how come this $2 million fidelity account's not in there? She says it is. I said, no, it's not. It says individual. So look at your statements. Do they say individual? Or do they say TOD? Or do they say revocable living trust? If it doesn't say trust on there and it says individual, it's going to go to probate. Now, the worst thing that can happen is if you're married and your spouse has to probate that account. So we don't want that. A lot of times married couples will use one of these two, joint tenants with rights of survivorship or joint tenants in common. Now, these are dangerous. We do a joint tenant with right of survivorship and we figure, oh, you know, if I die, it'll be fine. That is true, but when you both die, it's got to go through probate. The other dangerous aspect of joint tenant with rights of survivorship that we often see is maybe Mary lost her husband. She doesn't want her daughter Susie to have to probate the estate, so she lists Susie as a joint tenant with rights of survivorship. Her daughter won't have to probate the estate, but Mary could have serious problems, because what if Susie is married to a jerk, finally wises up and divorces the jerk, and the jerk knows that she owns half of mom's assets. There's going to be a problem. Or a bankruptcy. You know, a lot of our baby boomer children are going through bankruptcies, foreclosures. All of these can affect the parent if their child is a joint tenant with right of survivorship. So don't list anyone who isn't a spouse, and I really don't even like that titling. I'd rather have the two of you, if you're a married couple, be owners, and then have a TOD or a POD, or if you already have a trust, that's okay too. Joint tenants in common is very dangerous because we see it with married couples who are married for the second or third time. He has his children, she has her children. Oh, we'll do joint tenants in common because it protects each other. Well, what it forces is probate after the death of the first one of you. So you want to try not to use that. It would be better if, you know, if you're going to get married for the second time or third time and one of you has more assets, you need a prenuptial agreement. If you don't want to get the prenuptial agreement, then you should just keep everything in your name and do beneficiaries to whoever it is you'd like to have that. All right, so these are some of the things here. Now, there is a type of trust that you might need whether you have a large estate or not. The irrevocable life insurance trust is something to consider. Now, who needs an irrevocable life insurance trust? Well, generally somebody with a larger estate, but sometimes people who have medium-sized estates but who have large death benefits in their life insurances need this. That's because everybody thinks about life insurance as being tax-free. Well, it's only income tax-free, it's not death tax-free. So your life insurance death benefits that pay out when you die are included in your death taxable estate. For example, let's say we have a retired couple and they have $500,000 when they die, but they have a life insurance policy that pays $2 million when they die. That's not uncommon. Sometimes we see that. People plan ahead. They want to leave something, a nice death benefit to the kids, and they bought it a long time ago and it's paid up. Well, what happens is this $2 million, if they just die with their $500,000, they wouldn't have been subject to death tax, but this $2 million counts in their taxable estate for death tax purposes, could potentially be wiped out at 50 cents on the dollar. So if it's not set up right and you die with a large death benefit, half of it could end up going to your good old Uncle Sam for death tax. How do you avoid that? Well, you can set up this ILIT. That stands for Irrevocable Life Insurance Trust. The IRS got smart and they said, okay, well, we won't include these death benefits in the death tax estate if you have the policy owned by someone other than yourself. So in any life insurance policy, you have an owner, you have an insured, and you have a beneficiary. Typically, your owner and your insured are the same person. Unless you get into a larger death benefit situation, then the IRS says the owner has to be somebody else other than you for this to work. And it can't be your spouse either. So sometimes we see people name their children as owner. You can do that. The child is then responsible for paying the premiums. You can gift them the premiums, but they have to pay the premiums themselves. They also, because they're the owner, they can change the beneficiaries. They can activate or cash in the cash value. They can decide not to pay the premiums, or they can cancel the policy. So I remember years ago a lady asked me to come to her home, probably about 15 years ago before I had my office here. She lived in the Villages. She said, will you come to my home? It was after a seminar. She says, I want you to look at my life insurance policy. So she had her daughter as the owner, and of course when you're not the owner you can't get very much information from the insurance company, but we called up and what we found out was shocking. Her daughter had cashed in the policy, taken all the cash value, it was like a couple $100,000 out, and the policy was no good anymore, and it had happened about 2 years ago ago, the woman had no idea. She'd been gifting her daughter the money to pay the premiums, and not only was the daughter not paying the premiums, but she had cashed in the policy. So when people hear this and they say, well, maybe I shouldn't have my child be the owner. You know, maybe it's not your child you have to worry about, it's who they're married to. So then that's where you want to have perhaps an irrevocable life insurance trust. And the trust is then the owner. Now it's important to understand when you have an irrevocable trust, it cannot be changed. So whatever you've written in that trust and who's to benefit from this death benefit here, if that person starts going in the wrong direction, for example, years ago the United Way had some problems and a lot of people had them listed as beneficiary in their irrevocable life insurance trust. Well, there's nothing you can do about that. So you want to make sure that whoever you list in there is somebody that's probably not going to go in the wrong direction, we hope. And then the irrevocable life insurance trust keeps the death benefit out of your death taxable estate, and there's nothing to worry about. So if you'd like more information on this, we give seminars on these topics all the time in my office. No cheesy lunch or dinner, just come in and hopefully you'll learn something new. I try to treat you like I would my own parents. My mother's 85. She's worked hard her whole life as a teacher, and I don't want her to run out of money. So I have her money protected. She can't lose it. She gets tax-free income, and she'll never run out of money no matter how long she lives. If you like that, maybe I can help you too.
Jean came up with some suggestions and a plan for me.
We've managed to maintain everything that we had invested, so we're happy.
Now we feel that we're pretty well protected.
We're very impressed with the knowledge and information that Jean shared with us, and we made an appointment to talk to her.
Whoever is out there looking for a financial planner, you better consider this person.
If I had not gone with Jean, I would have lost something like $60,000.